Tonight on Free Minds TV, we talk about how Lemonade Liberation Day was brutally crushed by jackbooted thugs in Washington, D.C. We'll also be getting into the way the state of New York deals with marijuana penalties and the way certain judges deal with homosexuality. That coming up tonight on Free Minds TV.
Welcome to a brand new edition of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. This is the 219th regular episode we've recorded, or episode 31 of season 6. And as always, it's Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Got a whole lot to get into tonight, Nick. We're going to be showing some video that came from Washington, D.C. This past Saturday was National Lemonade Liberation Day to protest the crackdown on lemonade stands across the country. We've shown videos and talked about these stories for years, really, because it's an ongoing.
Typically, what we're reporting on, though, when we report on these things taking place in small town or in cities around the country, where it's actually kids running the lemonade stands, we're not dealing with a protest that got shut down. We're dealing with just kids trying to sell lemonade. So this is a protest about those crackdowns.
Yes, I think it's
where
actually
a crackdown occurred.
Yeah, this is probably the first protest arrest video of lemonade we've ever shown, or I've ever seen.
Well, I mean, it's because we just reached the point where, you know, it's bad enough that you actually have to have a protest about your right to sell or for the most part, kids' right to sell lemonade.
Anyways, we'll be showing the video and talking about that. We'll also be getting into some parenting issues, one coming out of New York around a marijuana case.
Well,
and then,
yeah, there's a question, is it a parenting issue or is it a state of New York issue?
Well, we'll be getting into that, as well as a really bigoted ruling coming out of Texas having to do with gay men's rights and parenting. I don't know if it would go the same way for lesbians. This particular story about a gay man and fighting for custody to see his child. Anyways, we'll be getting into those. But first, let's go right into it. Let's talk about lemonade. Now, as we stated,
lemons.
Yes,
some sugar in there.
It is,
some water,
and it's sold all over the place. I don't know. I've bought several cups of lemonade this past summer. Kids always, for the most part, kids are selling it. But this past Saturday, there was a national protest. I don't know how many people partook in it. The most, we should say, high-profile protest happened in Washington, D.C., right on the greenery of the state capitol. The national capital, I should say. It happened right there. There were other protests, but apparently no reported arrests besides the one at the state capitol. Now, before we get more into it and get into why these people are protesting the sale of lemonade, let's go ahead and show the video courtesy of copblock.org, and then we'll get into it. Let's roll the clip.
But what is terror? According to the dictionary I hold in my hand, terror is violent or destructive acts, such as bombing, committed by groups in order to intimidate a population or government into granting their demands. So what's a terrorist? They're calling me a terrorist.
You have a permit, right? No, sir. Can't be here.
Hail to the freedom!
There you are, dearie.
Have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
There's no vending on Capitol grounds. You guys aware of that?
It's a free country, ma'am.
And you guys are continuing.
You want lemonade? Yeah? Did you want a cup?
10 cents for some lemonade, guys.
2 more?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your business.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Would you like a cup as well?
Yes, don't be intimidated. Don't be intimidated. Don't be intimidated by them.
How you doing? Don't take pictures.
Whoa! Hey!
Out of our face.
Private property.
You got that on camera. Please don't break equipment, man.
Voluntary. Nobody's being hurt by
No money. No money. They want to give you something for free, they'll give it to you for free. They're not giving them any money.
10 cents. 10 cents.
Don't give them any money.
We are free people.
Have a good afternoon.
This is vending without a permit. Get out of my face. Vending without a permit. So you guys want to be arrested for your cause of lemonade liberation.
Ma'am. Come liberate the lemons. Lemonade, 10 cents, guys. 10 cents lemonade. 10 cents lemonade. Come get your 10 cents lemonade while it's nice and cold. Do not use violence. Do not use violence and force against peaceful people.
Well, I have.
Ma'am, this is not an option anymore. You are under
Leave these
arrest. I need
people
you to
alone.
come here. I'm sorry, you're under arrest.
Leave these people alone. Leave them alone.
I am getting arrested for selling lemonade. Do I have surgery?
Lemonade, 10 cents, guys. We've got a few cups
That's what
left.
happens when you sell lemonade.
I'm selling lemonade.
Is there anything on you that can hurt me?
You people should be ashamed of yourselves. Lemonade is illegal to sell in America. Stop using force against peaceful peoples. I spent 14 months in Baghdad, and I can't even sell lemonade on public property.
Hey, folks, I'm sorry. I apologize.
No, make them not run! No, make them not run! No!
When they put it on me, I tell them this. I'm all about peace and love. They're calling me a terrorist.
Martin Luther King and Muhammad Gandhi spoke about such a thing.
Insulting my
Back up just a little bit, please.
Not free
Back up,
lemonade.
thank you.
Your tax dollars!
Now, you know what I found most interesting about that video? Is how angry some of those cops seemed. Why? I mean, really, why be so angry? You're just doing, you're going to work, you're collecting a paycheck. Are you really offended that people are selling lemonade in the civil disobedience? It's just, it boggles my mind. And this whole putting your hand in front of the camera thing, it just seems cliche to me. I don't, that's what I don't get. Why the anger? Yeah, I know you're doing your job. To me, it's a sucky job. But why the anger behind that job? Is it really that upsetting?
I don't know. It's a good point. They're getting paid.
Well, why
They're
do
on
they
the clock,
care?
right? So it's like, oh, I became a cop because
They should
I
be
didn't want
happy.
to arrest anyone.
They should be happy, Nick, because they're not in danger. This is like the easiest. This is a cakewalk for them. They're not having to go up against any real criminals who would actually potentially harm them.
Well,
any people. I mean,
Well, I think part of the anger you might see when they're busting up protests like that is that they realize it doesn't make them look too good, and on a personal level, they might not want to. They might not even care. If it was up to the individual officers, they may not have done anything about it, and they don't feel like being in a YouTube clip like they probably know is going to happen.
right, but then if they don't, then they're just shooting themselves in the foot by getting all angry. I mean, if they feel bad about arresting people who haven't hurt anybody, they should be like, I'm sorry, I'm doing my job, not, hey, you're not following my orders, I'm so pissed off now, I'm gonna shove the camera down at that one guy. No, you're under arrest now. It's like, sorry, you're under arrest. It's my
Actually,
job.
the only one who really seemed particularly cranky was the female. Who
No, the guy who made the
Well,
arresting order, he seemed pretty upset.
Well, when you're arresting somebody, I suppose you got to be angry.
Why?
I don't know. Because you're arresting somebody.
Okay,
You're
anyways.
locking them up. I mean,
Okay, that's not the point, I guess. That's just something that I noticed.
you are physically like.
Sure, but it's their job. Why would you be angry about doing your job?
Whoever that female officer was seemed pretty pissed off.
You need to get
Looked
the
like she was in
emotion out of it.
charge.
Just
She had the nice hat, not the bike helmet.
anyways. Okay,
What's
that's
with the
not the
bike
point.
helmets?
Here's the point. I know a lot of people out there are going, well, it's obvious. Obviously, if you're selling stuff on the Capitol, and the national capital here, you're selling stuff right there. You can't do that. Everybody would just come and sell stuff for free, and it would be a giant flea market out there. Can't do that. It's not the point in this protest, though. The point in this protest is to get some high profile, to get YouTube clips, to show the absurdity of the law itself. Because every single year, we could be reporting every week, we could be bringing in stories about kids getting their lemonade stands shut down. Whether it's on their own property in their own front yards, or whether it's in a park. I mean, I bought a lot of lemonade here in Keene, where we're broadcasting from. To my knowledge, no arrests. But across the country, there are crackdowns all the time. And it's really not just a crackdown against lemonade stands. That's not what angers me so much. What it is, it's a crackdown against kids being entrepreneurs, getting out there, making a few bucks as kids.
Well, maybe they're really doing the kids a good service, Toby, because
They're
gonna
teaching them how the world works.
Well, they're not necessarily the world, because in many parts of the world, you can just go out and sell things, and the odds of you being arrested or facing a fine aren't very high. But the United States isn't one of those places, especially in any city. I mean, in most rural areas, and even here in Keene, in the smaller towns, you can probably get away with it. But in most parts of the country, if you don't fill out the proper paperwork, you're really not. I mean, the presumption now, whereas when the regulations first started to creep into the economy, it was still pretty much a free economy, but certain actions were regulated. Basically, the presumption now is you should assume that going out and making money is illegal,
unless you have the proper paperwork.
Right. I mean, well,
permits,
even for
paid.
tax purposes. I mean, do you have all the paperwork necessary? Are you running a business? Do you need a taxpayer ID?
Are you in the right neighborhood?
Right. I mean,
you zoned properly.
Right. So, I mean, the presumption right now is that you're probably in violation of 20 or 30 things if you just go out and start selling something or offering some kind of a service. And I don't think that's in any small part related to the fact that our unemployment rate looks like something we're more used to seeing in France.
Well, why would
France
you go
did
and
this
get
for
a
a
job?
long time before us.
Why
Now
would
we're
you
there.
go and get a job? Seriously, what do you get out of it? Because go out and start a business, I should say. You're taught as a kid, I guess now, that your business will get crushed if you don't jump through all these government hoops. And then it's no wonder why you see people, well, I guess I'll just be the jackbooted thug. I'll grow up to be another strong arm of the law because they get a paycheck going around crushing people who are trying to sell things. It's very sad.
Right. Well,
to
and
me.
it really doesn't take too much. I mean, when you talk about crushing a small business, it's not that the people who are in charge of enforcing the regulations are necessarily doing it on purpose. Although I think a lot of those regulations were put in place, especially when you're dealing, maybe not your local city ordinances, although this happens in that case sometimes too. But I think a lot of the regulations, especially on the federal level, were put into place at the behest of large corporations in a particular industry because they wanted to limit competition. And it's been very effective at that. It doesn't take a whole lot to crush, say, a small family business right now. Profit margins might be razor thin. So even if you think you're doing everything by the book, there are a lot of books and a lot of rules in all those books, and there's no way you can know all the rules for OSHA and your local zoning rules, things like that, the tax code. So
even if you do know all the rules,
right.
though, Nick,
you get slapped with a fine or something, or a
even
compliance
if you know,
issue for $5,000.
It's so hard to jump through all the hoops. You've got to have a lot of money or take out a very big loan to start a business. You either have to start off with hundreds of thousands of dollars in many cases. You have to go to school, whether you want to cut hair, paint nails, whatever.
Bankers are allowed to make money in this country.
Yeah, and then you
as
can
we
never.
all know now.
And then, if you're going in debt to bankers, you can never actually make a good living. You're always just paying your money on interest to the bank. A lot of people could easily go start their own business, whether it be cutting hair, trimming fingernails, washing pets, I don't know, whatever it is across the country. Millions of different opportunities to make money, but the hoops you have to jump through for every single one. Cutting hair here in New Hampshire a while ago was like 1,500 hours of schooling. I think they reduced it down to like 1850 after some civil disobedience.
Yeah, it's 750. They cut it right in half.
But the point
still
is,
750 hours.
Plus all the schooling on top of that, the licensing fees, the zoning.
Right.
Anyways, the point
Whereas
is,
if you're a bad barber, people just won't get a haircut from you.
Right. I mean, give me a break. I don't need to know my barber's licensed. I go there. He butchers my hair. I go, okay, I'm not going there anymore. I've never gone into a barber shop and go, let me see your credentials. Let me see your state, where the state has approved of your business here. No, of course not. You go there, it's word of mouth. This is how businesses work. If a business is bad, they're going to go out of business.
And you have to, how about a lawn mowing license?
Oh, no, landscaping. You require...
in some places you need that.
In New Hampshire you do. Anyways, it's, at least last time I checked, you do. And it's like that all across the country, and we wonder why the economy's in the toilet. Let's fix it. Let's get rid of the regulation. I think that's what this whole protest was meant to represent. I mean, these people weren't making money off selling lemonade for 10 cents a cup.
Not if
those
you
cups
the
there,
tip to DC.
Those were some high quality cups there. The people didn't
the cups probably cost 10 cents.
Right, and the people didn't live in DC. They had to drive there. Yeah. So, anyways, yeah, liberate the lemons. I like that. It's good representation of it. And I also say, let the kids be entrepreneurs. Show them that it's a good thing, not a bad thing. If you're a police officer and you pass a lemonade stand, maybe buy a cup of lemonade. Anyways, we've got to move on. We've got a couple other stories I really think is important to get to. Talking about, possibly the rights of parents. Not really sure.
Yeah, it does touch on that. This is coming out of New York, specifically out of New York City. And there's a story here of police finding 10 grams of marijuana, which works out to about a third of an ounce for people who don't know the metric system that well.
Not very much.
Right, when they searched Penelope Harris's apartment in the Bronx last year. Now, this amount in New York is even below the level where they can prosecute for a misdemeanor. So it's not even really illegal any more than perhaps
Been decriminalized.
Right. It's not maybe in the same way that letting your parking meter expire is illegal. But Child Protective Services there still took her son, who is 10, who spent more than a week in foster care, and her niece, who is 8. She was also she was living with her as a foster child already, and they took her and put her back into the system. And this is, I mean, there was no allegation that she was using the drugs at the time. She has no criminal record, no previous cases for child neglect or anything like that. And she tested negative for drugs after she was released.
Wow.
So she claims that the marijuana belonged to her boyfriend and it was a personal use amount, and that's believable. Either that, or if she tested negative for marijuana,
She's not a very regular
right,
user.
not at all. So I mean, because marijuana does stay in your system for a pretty long time, unless you're only using perhaps once every couple of months. So, I mean, but apparently this is not an isolated case. They've got law firms here that comment that I guess there's particular law firms that act to defend most people. The city appoints them, to act basically as public defenders. And let's see, Lauren Shapiro, director of the Brooklyn Family Defense Project, which defends most parents facing neglect charges in family court in Brooklyn, said more than 90% of the cases alleging drug use that her lawyers handle involved marijuana as opposed to other drugs. She said the vast majority of those involve personal use amounts where there's no real evidence of harm to a child. Some other states that have taken the tact of more or less decriminalizing marijuana, I guess California sets different rules, and there, for a neglect case to go forward, they actually have to prove that drugs were used and they somehow caused some harm to the child.
Well, that would make sense because,
As
I mean,
opposed to
alcohol
just
is a very dangerous drug. I mean, you look at the majority of domestic calls to houses and alcohol is involved. And it's a much more dangerous drug than marijuana, yet if you have alcohol
well, how about
in your...
prescription drugs?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, you have these prescription drugs or alcohol in the home, that's not going to get your kids taken away, but this, something that's actually decriminalized, will. It's a double standard, it's disgusting, and imagine the effect it has on these children.
They do point out, they pointed out some other statistics here that I thought were interesting. According to the city's official health stats, about twice as many whites use marijuana in New York as opposed to blacks and Hispanics, which is actually, some people have a misconception about this, but minorities typically are not the biggest consumer of recreational drugs. It's typically middle-class white people, especially, this is talking about New York City, but especially suburban white middle-class males between the ages of 15 and 30, that age range. Those are the people using most of the drugs in the country. It's not poor minorities.
I would be
younger white
I would
males
suspect
with a little bit of disposable
that if you
income.
went through some of these cases, you would see a lot more people.
They said very few of the cases that have been brought forth for neglect simply because the parent possessed marijuana were brought against white people.
Not surprised at all.
Just, I mean, I don't think you can deny that that's the way the criminal justice system still works.
Yep.
If you're black, you're more likely to face stringent drug charges. You're more likely to face stiffer sentences in general. You're more likely to be put to death. I mean, it's just by just proportions that are all out of whack. You really can't explain it away and say, that's a coincidence. It's just the way it works. We still basically, to some extent, being black or Hispanic is a secondary offense in the criminal justice system. You have to do something else to get there, or be accused of doing something else to get there. But once you're in the system, you'll probably be hit a lot harder than a white person will.
Yep. Well, racism is alive in this country, no matter how much people try to brush it under the rug. And you know what? Who the biggest offenders of this are? Is the government. I mean, the government, who you would think is, well, we've moved beyond this, we ended slavery, right? No, not at all. I mean, look at your own prisons, your own so-called justice system. The bigotry is alive in a lot of cases because the government sanctions it. They propagate it. Look at the prisons. Look at the courts.
I mean, it may not be done on a conscious. Who knows if it's done on a conscious level?
Some cases yes, some cases
right.
no.
But certainly overall, when you look at things like drug offenses, I mean, I seriously doubt, particularly if it's a white judge or a white prosecutor. This is just the way I'm not saying it's right or anything.
It's power and privilege.
Or that this is going to happen in every. Maybe some people are conscious of it, and it might not happen in every case. But I think typically, if you had a white prosecutor or a white judge seeing this case, and it was a white mother, and actually the article doesn't mention the race here, but I'm willing to guess she wasn't white, then you would have seen a much different result. You wouldn't have actually seen kids taken out of the home anyway.
Right.
So,
no, and if you look at the percentage of judges and prosecutors who are white, it's a much higher percentage. So unfortunately the deck is stacked against minorities.
well, that's why drugs are illegal in the first place.
As minorities, yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Pot was made illegal because
Hispanics,
demonized Hispanics
and some blacks used it.
yeah.
Cocaine was made illegal because it was perceived that black men would use it in the South and rape white women.
Yeah.
That was the open rationale that was offered, and that's about as consistent as the push for the war on drugs has ever been. The case for it hasn't ever really gotten all that much better when you look at what the laws actually do and what they're actually preventing. It's been scare tactics from the start, and if the racism hadn't been involved and it was understood that the laws are really going to apply to everybody someday, I seriously doubt you would have seen them. They certainly wouldn't have crafted prohibition in the way that they did.
No. All right. Well, it's not only the war on drugs where there's discrimination, and not only against minorities. It's also, there's a lot of discrimination by the government against people who are not heterosexual, against gay people. A Houston judge entered an order on June 24 which prohibits a father from leaving his children alone with any man they aren't related to by blood or adoption. William Flowers is not only gay, but he's also married to his partner, Jim Evans. William and Jim were married on March 19 of last year in Connecticut, one of the 7 states that currently recognizes same-sex unions. William and his ex-wife divorced in 2004. They agreed their 3 children could live with her. Wanting to change the arrangement, William recently filed for custody in Harris County. A jury found that his ex-wife, should keep the kids, though his regular visitations would continue. Neither William nor his ex-wife alleged that the children had been abused or were in any danger of being abused. Following the trial, Harris County Associate Judge Charlie E. Prine Jr. issued a ruling which included an injunction application only to William. It prohibits him from leaving his children alone with any male whom the kids are not related to by blood or adoption. So, for example, William wants to visit his mother in the hospital, where she's been for a few weeks now. He can't leave his kids home with his husband. As written, the injunction also prohibits male doctors, teachers, pastors, and babysitters. Now, you got to wonder about why the judge would rule in this manner. There has been absolutely no allegations of abuse. The order doesn't extend to his wife. She's allowed to leave the children alone with other males. Yet the husband, who's gay, can't leave him alone not only with his husband, but with any other male. Why could this be? Well, the judge didn't say, it's because I think that gay people are more prone to pedophilia. It's pretty obvious in this case. I'm going to say allegedly. The judge thinks that gay people are more prone to pedophilia, when in fact there hasn't been a single study ever, and there's been many that have been studied this, that shows there's any higher rates of pedophilia among gay people than there are among straight people. In fact, a lot of people who are pedophiles are actually straight. Some are gay, some are not. But there isn't any higher increase in the numbers among the gay population. So what it just goes to show is this judge is just a bigot. And this is propagated by the so-called justice system. Go justice.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly true. And, I think in this case it was probably a very conscious choice. In the cases we were talking about previously where it was focused on race, maybe, in that case, a lot of the judges or the prosecutors, maybe they just don't understand their inner motivations. But I mean, if you're just looking at somebody who doesn't look like you, I feel like psychologically you're more prone to demonize them and less likely to empathize and say, well, yeah, they did something bad or deserving of punishment, but we don't need to crush them down to the ground because they're not a monster, they're just a human being. When it comes to discrimination based on sexual orientation, it's still it's still somewhat acceptable for a judge to say, yep, I just don't like you gays.
Well, look at the campaign. It's still, you have to be secretive when you're discriminating against minorities, people of different ethnic backgrounds. But when you're discriminating against people based on their sexual orientation, it's still disgustingly okay to be out in the open. Look at the current campaigns going, especially among a lot of the right-wing Republicans. It's sick the way that they talk about this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's one step. Not that everybody's this extreme, because I realize that there's a lot of people out there who don't necessarily like homosexuality, but they're not raging bigots and they wouldn't discriminate against people. Then there are a lot of people who watch those Republican campaigns, Toby, who, would prefer to see death camps or something.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not really hyperbole. I mean, there are some people out there who just
they
just cite the biblical passage.
They're not
like,
embarrassed.
We should just kill y'all.
That's the thing. There's so many people who aren't embarrassed about it, but they should be. Right. Just like in, say, 50 years ago, there were people who said the same thing about African Americans. Yet today, you watch those videos and people's stomachs turn. It's disgusting. There's still a lot of racism going on, but for the most part, it has to be secretive. It has to be under the radar, such as the war on drugs, all that racism, power and privilege stuff. But here, with the gay population, it just seems like, well, it's okay. And no, it's not everybody. But for the most part, I mean, you'll see a media clip with a politician on it preaching against the gays, essentially. And they just run it, don't even have commentary about this is straight up bigotry. In my opinion, they should point that out. Like, this presidential candidate just said that. And that was very bigoted. At least to remind people, like, this is what you're watching. Maybe that's commentary and that's what we're supposed to do. But I feel like in journalism, there's just not pointed out. I think it should be pointed out. Like, this is a very bigoted stance.
I don't think the times. I mean, I think we're right now, especially with the younger generation. I think it seems very big. We're kind of at that turning point where it's changing over from okay to not okay.
We're out of time. freemindstv.com. Send us your comments, what you think about this. Until next time, it's been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Have a great night.